Hi, I'm Neil Schwartz, president of SBRnet. And first, I want to thank the folks from the running event for inviting me to participate at this year's conference. It seems like every few years, I'm talking about a new generation of consumers that are changing the way we look and think about our respective businesses. This year, or today, we're going to focus on hiring and selling to Gen Z consumers. Now, Gen Z consumers are the largest group of consumers and potential employees that present a number of challenges for retailers, for brands, and really anyone that is in the running specialty category of business. They're young, they walk to a different beat, and they're not afraid to express their own individuality. Now, just in case you had any doubt, I am not a Gen Z. And while I'm not as old as this dude on the screen right now, I am a baby boomer. I am, however, a baby boomer that has spent the great deal of his time understanding how different generations react within the consumer marketplace. In fact, if I want to talk to my millennial children, they say that I don't understand anything. But the facts are, I do, because I look at the data, and the data helps to tell me a story. So before I go on a little bit more, I'd like to say a little bit about me and my company. So personally, I have over 30 plus years of experience, of which 26 years in the sports business. I've worked with POS data while I was at SportScan. I've done participation data while I was with the SFIA. But when in the running specialty industry, I have had the distinction of working with brands, retail, consumers, and I was also the co-host of the Run Matters podcast, which really took an in-depth look at the running specialty business. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm president of SBRnet, and we are a leading supplier of data in the business of sports. In fact, we do the single largest ongoing consumer study of sports fans, covering 19 sports across 65 categories. Our data is currently used by over 250 colleges and universities, leagues, teams, events, brands, retail, and marketing agencies. So we really understand how to cover the business of sports. So the first part of our plan today is to focus on hiring Gen Z employees. And as many of you know that have been out there hiring people, the Gen Zs can really present some unique challenges. In the next few slides, we want to take a look more deeply into some of these insights, but we also want to look at those things that define the Gen Zs as it relates to their work lives. Now, I know many of you have seen the videos on TikTok and other social media platforms where this young Gen Z talks about how she can't, work a regular 9-to-5 job. Well, today we're going to look at not the outliers so much, but we're going to look at what I like to call the inliers. So we're going to try to look at the rules, not the exceptions. So first, let's get on the same page. Gen Zs are those people that were born from 1995 to 2012. And they currently make up close to 23% of the U.S. population. So they clearly are a force to be reckoned with and one that cannot be ignored. Let's further get on the same page and let's dig a little bit deeper. But what I've done here is I've separated this kind of little deeper dive into context, into the behaviors, and then consumption patterns. But for Gen Z, it's all about their mobility and multiple realities that they have to deal with. It's all about social networks and social networking. They are digital natives. They grew up with smartphones in their left or right hands. So again, they are focused on, they are very digital and used to working with social media. In fact, if you ask us Gen Z, they will tell you for the most part, they get their news from social media. They're undefined in that they want to experiment with different things and different ideas and different ways of living. So they have what they call an undefined ID. Now, they're also known as communaholics. That's a word that kind of threw me a little bit. But they do like to communicate. Even though they don't necessarily want to communicate between employer and employee or mentor, they do want to communicate. And who do they communicate with? Well, of course, they communicate with their friends, with their social networks, but also they like to communicate with people on TikTok or content on YouTube. And they also call themselves dialoguers. And again, dialoguers is someone that wants to communicate, just not who normally you would expect them to. But they want to be realistic. They want to be unique. They want to be themselves. So for Gen Z, life is all about their respective experiences. For Gen Z, their respective experience was growing up in the middle of the great pandemic, which has left them feeling connected and alone at the same time. And you might think, how can you be connected and alone? Well, if you've talked to a Gen Z, you'll find that they're great at texting back and forth. But when it comes to having a face-to-face conversation or even a phone conversation, that's not really going to get you very far. In fact, I always like to say, don't leave a Gen Z a voicemail because they're most likely not going to listen to
Everything I read about the younger generation, it worries me. Everything I read is Gen Z is the most depressed, anxiety-ridden generation of all time. That's concerning to me. Then I go on TikTok, they're all just dancing. I'm like, I think they're fine. I'm not a psychologist, but I've never ripped off spirit fingers at a funeral. So something tells me the children are okay. Then I listened to Gen Z rap once. I was like, the kids are sad. The kids are very sad. They need help. They need a lot of help now.
So Gen Zs are searching for the truth. In that fact, there are 4 basic overarching tenets that drive Gen Z from an employment standpoint. Number 1 is that they like to call themselves undefined ID. Don't define me. Don't stereotype me. I want to express as a Gen Z my individual truth. And yes, I am a communaholic. And yes, I am radically inclusive. But we are connecting through our individual truths. And again, there are truths, not your truths. I'm a dialoguer. But when you say I'm a dialoguer, I'm also avoiding confrontation. I don't necessarily want to get into a back and forth. I just want to have the opportunity to express myself, maybe get some feedback, but I do not want confrontation. And I'm also trying to understand different truths, but within myself. And they like to call themselves realistic or not radical, but they like to live pragmatically. So again, they're unveiling their true selves. Now, understanding what drives the Gen Z is the key to hiring, and then as we're going to look at later, selling to them. But for Gen Zs, the key point is not to define themselves through any one stereotype, but rather as individuals to experiment with different ways of being themselves. In fact, we like to call themselves, and I saw this term coined, identity nomads. So they're moving around to be different, to try different ways of living, different ways that they want to be that help them understand exactly who they are. But when we talk to employers, there are some common themes that seem to occur. Number 1, employers seem to question their work ethics. It seems they say that they don't really want to work that hard. Employees tend to turn inward when they get into a disagreement. They don't want to get into a conflict. They don't want to be questioned. They really just want to kind of do their thing. They lack motivation and initiative. In fact, one employer told me that, yeah, I can get these younger kids to do the tasks, but they're back on their phones, they're back on YouTube, they're back looking at, TikTok and things like that. Because number 1 is that Gen Zs want a higher work-life balance. They want work to mean something different than it has for previous generations. They also use their friends in TikTok as a source for affirmation, rather than seek out more experienced coworkers, or rather than listen to experienced coworkers to get advice. They'd rather go to their friends, their circle of social media folks, or even TikTok. A number of years ago, I was at an event and I ran into this management expert. His name is Simon Sinek. And if you've ever looked him up, I would highly recommend looking him up on LinkedIn. He wrote a book that really caught me very early in my career. And the book is called Why, Ask Why. Because it's not about what people are doing, but he talks about why people are doing it. And in this case, he talks about hiring Gen Z employees.
You are in a very difficult and uncomfortable position, because I think leadership is more difficult now than it has ever been, because you're dealing with human anxiety, you're dealing with human uncertainty, you're dealing with human ambition and human egos, and again, especially young people who think they know what they want and don't, who have certainty and are very outspoken and do not mind going around their boss's boss to come to you. So you're going to be dealing with a 19-year-old saying, "Why am I not given this?" And you're like, "I don't need, where do you work?"
But Simon also talks about offering up some strategies for hiring Gen Z employees.
And so I think there's a huge opportunity for an organization like yours to teach these young people coping mechanisms, stress relief, the biggest one being how to ask for help. That is the single biggest thing that is lacking at every generation, which is, I am struggling, can you help me? Whether it's personal or professional. That is absolutely lacking. And so we do unhealthy things to help compensate, social media and other things. And so I think
So when hiring the Gen Zs, it's really important to do these 4 things. Number 1, manage expectations. Find out what they support in terms of their causes. Help them realize what they like to call their altruistic aspirations. What motivates them? What drives them? What are those things that are important to the Gen Zs? When you communicate quick. Okay, you don't have a long time. They love to text. They would rather read than write, or they would rather read than talk. And also quick communications, also dress codes, relaxing, number of things within the work environment. Don't focus so much on profit motive. Focus more on company culture. This is how we want to run our company. This is what we believe in, because that will really resonate with Gen Zs. But for Gen Zs, work has to matter. They're looking at work-life balance. They want their developmental plans in writing. Where can I go a year from now? Is there room at a management level? And what do I have to do to get there? But they want it in writing. But they also don't want to be micromanaged. I got news for you. A lot of us don't want to be micromanaged, but Gen Zs in particular do not want to be micromanaged, even though they may not have the experience or even the education or training that they need in order to do their job properly. But next, we'd like to focus on selling to Gen Z customers, because a lot of what we've already talked about with respect to hiring Gen Zs also relates in many ways to selling of Gen Z customers.
Gen Z doesn't know how to write a check. They don't know how to address an envelope. They don't know how to read cursive. They don't know how to read a paper map. They can't get anywhere unless there's a GPS map on their phone. All I'm saying is if Gen Z takes over the world, it's going to be pretty easy to get it back. We're just going to write our battle plans in cursive on a piece of paper.
So now I'd like to get into Gen Z's relationship with running, because what you want to do is you want to understand from a running specialty perspective, what's their relationship with running. So when it comes to understanding where does the Gen Z get their information, where do they, how do they understand things? The biggest area that we find is that Gen Zs utilize social media not just to get product information, but also as their number one source for news. They're not going to traditional media, newspapers, God forbid. They don't read direct mail even. They don't go to experts as much. They will look at some traditional media in terms of websites, blogs, reviews, things like that. But the majority of Gen Z will go to social media to get their information when it comes to specific products. Again, it's very interesting because, again, they also rely on social media to get their news, which may explain a lot about some of the things that are going on right now in our political climate. But for the Gen Z, content is king. And when reaching the Gen Z, the two biggest content-focused media for them are YouTube and Instagram. You might think it's TikTok, but here I'm coming with an interesting TikTok fact. TikTok usage, while the lowest in terms of the total usage among the Gen Z, is actually the most used among the Gen Z. The average Gen Z goes to TikTok on average 40 times a day. That to me is just an incredible statistic. So while it may not be their favorite social media, they're going there over 40 times a day. So that means as a marketer, you really need to understand the bigger picture here when it comes to how they use social media, but also the number of instances where they go there. Look, YouTube and Instagram, content-oriented media, very popular. They're still going to Facebook. I guess they want to keep up with their moms and dads and maybe some of their, their older friends. Snapchat, not quite gaining a hold. Twitter, not sure what Twitter is to the Gen Z. X, it's changing its name. TikTok, but again, for TikTok, it's all about the number of total uses. So, Gen Z trends and consumer behavior. Well, like millennials, the Gen Z do care about experiences, but to them, the experiences are more about those that can enrich their everyday lives. It's not about short-term experiences, a short-term vacation, a short-term trip. It's about hobbies. It's about home entertainment. It's about, again, longer entertainment needs. Gen Zs consider themselves the true gen, in contrast to the previous generation, the millennials, which sometimes were called the me generation. True Gen likes to feel that they are part of a bigger story, a bigger situation. So again, they like to call themselves the True Gen. Gen Zs came through the biggest black swan event since the Great Depression and World War II. I would love to have a time machine. I would love to go back and talk to those consumers that have gone through the Depression. And look, I watch a lot of documentaries like a lot of people here. And I am sure that we've heard all about what it's like to go through the Depression and then World War II. But unless you've talked to somebody directly, it's hard to really understand how these black swan events have affected their lives. Now, a black swan event, of course, is something that rarely, if not ever, occurs. Gen Zs, most influenced by social media. They get their news, they get their product information, they literally get everything that they need from social media. But Gen Zs want to stand out, not fit in. So brands are not as important to them. Rather, they're looking for the next unique product or the next unique brand. And that is one of the things that's helping to drive in the running specialty business the growth of a couple of brands that I don't necessarily want to mention by name, but we all know who they are, that have really been able to gain a significant foothold in the category. The Gen Z has been a big part of that. Gen Z is also radically inclusive and relate to those brands that line up with that attitude. They're really looking for brands that are lined up to their attitudes when it comes to DEI areas. They also want to provide a platform for their ethical causes or something that's called effective altruism. Now, effective altruism is defined, and this is my definition, but it's basically putting your money or putting your time where your mouth is. Don't just talk about it, get involved. It's all about these causes. It's all about my causes. It's all about me getting involved, or effective altruism. But when it comes to running, there's a number of really ways that the Gen Z is affecting. Number one is that the Gen Zs are going a little old school when it comes to shopping. In fact, they're back in brick and mortar stores. Now, here's the big difference. For Millennials and Gen X, it was an or question. I'm either shopping in brick and mortar or I'm online. That's not the way it is for Gen Z. For Gen Z, it's an and question. So Gen Z is shopping more online, but they're also shopping at brick and mortar. Because why? They are always connected and always have the ability to shop. So again, it's not an or question. It's an and question. Look, comfort and fit, still the biggest motivators. You know, they still want shoes that fit well. They still want shoes that feel good. They still want shoes also that look good, because fashion gets their attention. You know, and fashion for this group is expressed in a different way. They want utility beyond running. You're more likely, in fact, to see a Gen Z walking or doing some sort of walk-run exercise than you might see them doing a straight run. Because exercise and fitness for the Gen Z take on a completely different definition. So understand how the Gen Zs are using, Run Specialty, how they're using running shoes, how they're understanding which brands are really meeting their needs. In fact, you're more likely to see the Gen Z gravitate to newer brands than you are their older generations. I told the Gen Z, in fact, if your mom and dad are wearing a particular brand, you're more than likely going to see their Gen Z children not wearing that brand. They will go a different way. They will be their own people. They will express their individualism, easy for me to say, individualism